Good morning, church. Welcome to church. Welcome to another Sunday. It's so good that we can be together in this way, isn't it? I hope you've had a good week. You know, we've just been looking out of our window and it was snowing and it just looked really, really pretty. I don't know why I'm even telling you that, but it just looked really pretty. And so whether you're in the snow or whatever you're in today, we just want to say thank you for joining us for church. I just want to encourage you a little bit in kind of the importance of taking notes. Right, if I can. I'm a great note taker. I love taking notes, and this is my book that I've been taking notes in since this time last year. Really, is when I kind of started this book. And the last 2 weeks, we as a family have been in isolation, which has been okay, and we've managed it. But you know, there are certain things that you kind of think about and you dream about when you're in isolation. And one of the things for me was to have my Starbucks coffee. So this weekend, this is what my freedom looked like. It was in a Starbucks cup, and I thought, this is freedom. This is freedom. Okay, so had finally had my Starbucks coffee, which was fantastic. But I was looking over my notes kind of last night and then this morning, and I was looking back at kind of this time last year, and before all of this pandemic started, before we were in this situation that we're in now. And one of the last, we used to have, when we had proper church, you know, we were all there together, we used to have team church before the big service, the main service. And one of the last team churches we had was on the 8th of March, 2020. And you know what? If I hadn't have taken notes, I wouldn't have remembered this at all. And this is why I'm just going to encourage you, when Pastor Dave comes to preach, try and take some notes, because I'm telling you, they're worth looking back over. Even a year later, your notes are worth it. And the last team churches we had, Lizzie, who's part of our church, who we love, she brought a team preach to church. And it was called, it said, "A blessing is worth waiting, persevering for." It's worth waiting for. Now, we've done a lot of waiting in this last year, haven't we? And we've done a lot of waiting just in the last couple of weeks, waiting to be free, waiting for one thing and another, which is why I was saying about my coffee. But this word is just still so appropriate. It really is so appropriate. And she read from Psalm 23, where it says, "You serve me a 6-course meal right in front of my enemies." You know, and she talked about your faith needs a focus. And she said, keep your focus. Have you kept your focus over the last year? Have you kept your focus, church? The promise that God gave you a year ago, and we're looking and we're thinking, well, I can't imagine how this is going to happen. It will, I'm telling you, because you know what Lizzie went on to say? She went on to say, the blessing is already yours. It's already ours, church. And so I just want to encourage you this week. I want to encourage you to hold on. Remember, don't give up. Hold on. We're coming to the end. We're coming, you know, this last couple of weeks, we've heard of more and more people who we know, and I'm sure you're the same, who've had their vaccination for the COVID vaccination, and we are all desperately waiting to have ours, so that we can like run outside and say, yeah, we're free, you know, we've had it. And so hang on, don't give up, keep your focus. The blessing's still there. The promise that God gave you, however long ago it was, it's still there. Keep your eyes fixed on him. Okay, so that's it. That's my introduction. We're going to come to the word now. Pastor Dave is continuing on his series, which has just been absolutely brilliant. And so settle down, get your notebooks, get your pens, and be ready for a great morning. Okay.
Hi, good morning, everybody. We are so glad this morning you joined us. So glad you tuned in. I don't know who this message is for this morning, but that bit about taking notes is very important for somebody this morning, because somebody this morning, this message is for you and you need to take notes on it. It's a big message. It's too big for 1 week, so I'm going to spread it over 2 weeks. It's too important and too big. And if I was to say to somebody this morning, without being dramatic, it's potentially life-saving. Okay, so that's how important it is this morning. So please tune in, please please listen out this morning. It's a kind of message that I wish we were all in the house for this morning. I wish we were all in the same room this morning. In the words of Hamilton, in the room where it happens, right? Because I know that when we get together, things happen. And this is a kind of message that I really wish that we were all together for. So it's vitally important. It's a big message. And we're in a stream of messages. I don't know if I could call it a series. It's actually a stream of messages this morning about stranger things and the strange time we're in about stranger things. And I want to talk this morning on the subject of this morning's subject also. If you're taking notes, this is something to write down. Strangely familiar. Okay? Strangely familiar. And I'm going to read from the book of Ezra in the Old Testament. I'm going to go back to Ezra chapter 4 and read a few verses from the beginning of Ezra chapter 4. And I might think out loud a little bit while I'm reading this, because it's so important that we get this, that we hear this, and especially for, I don't know who it's for, but especially for somebody this morning who really does need to hear this. Okay, so bear with me. I'm going to read from Ezra chapter 4 verse 1, and it's from the Message Bible, so it's broken down into a language you can easily understand. Okay, Ezra 4 verse 1 says this: old enemies. Everybody say old enemies. And I really want you to hold on to that this morning and this week, those words, old enemies, right? Store them, hold on to them, remember them this morning. Old enemies of Judah and Benjamin heard that the exiles were building the temple of the God of Israel. They came to Zerubbabel and they said to him, "We'll help you build." Oh, I've heard that before. Okay, sorry, thinking out loud again. I've heard that before. "We worship your God the same as you. Therefore, we must be friends, right? Therefore, you have to let me into your life, right? Therefore, you've got to let me into your secrets, right?" So I'm just thinking out loud again, sorry. Verse 2, "We've been offering sacrifices to him since the king of Syria brought us here." In other words, we've changed. I've heard that before as well. We've changed. And I know we should give people every opportunity to change. So I'm just thinking out loud here as I'm reading this. We ought to give people every opportunity to change. When people say, "We've been offering sacrifices to the same God as you," so we've changed, we're different. The proof is in what they do next. That's for somebody this morning. If somebody tells you, "I've changed, we've changed, therefore, I'm different, I've changed," that's good. But the proof is in what they do next. Verse 2 says this: "Zerubbabel, Jeshua, and the rest of the family heads of Israel said to them, 'Nothing doing. Building the temple of God is not the same thing to you as us.'" And thinking out loud again, I want to say that so many times to some people that when you talk about church, for some people, church is a hobby. And I'm not being awful when I say it, but it's true. Church is a hobby. It's something that people pick up and something that people put down. But for us, it's our lives. So I can identify with this morning, you see. And I think everybody who's leading in church, and everybody whose church is their passion, and church is their focus, and church is the center of their lives with God, that we sometimes want to say to people, "Listen, building a temple of God is not the same thing to you as us." And when I talk about proof that people have changed, here's what they did next. Verse 4 says this: "So these people, these old enemies, started beating down the morale of the people of Judah, harassing them as they built." Listen to this. "They even hired propagandists." If you don't know who propagandists are or what propagandists are people who don't even know you, and yet who deliberately spread rumors and gossip and stories and lies about people. That's what propagandists are. And I just think there might be people listening this morning who've had some propagandists in your life who don't even know you properly, who don't even know you very well. But because of what old enemies have said, maybe, see, I told you this of somebody this morning, I really don't know who it is, but there are old enemies coming back into your life, and they've hired propagandists to spread rumors and lies and all kind of hearsay. They even hired propagandists, listen to this, to sap their resolve. Listen to this. This is incredible. They kept this up for 15 years. Have you got that this morning? They kept this up for 15 years. 15 years of harassment. 15 years of stalking. 15 years of having rumors and lies and gossip and scandal and all kind of stuff. 15 years being harassed by old enemies. Who am I talking to this morning? It all sounds strangely familiar. So I want to direct this message this morning, and you know, I kind of want to pray that, Lord, I'm going to do my best, but without His anointing and without His blessing and without His favor and His smile, and without the breath of heaven on this message, it's just me ranting and it's me talking. But I don't believe it is that this morning. I believe that God has a word and God has a message, and it's a big word and it's a big message for somebody this morning. And I want to speak to people this morning. Number one, so if you're writing notes, it's first mine number one, okay? So I've done mine in grey. I can't colour coordinate my notes, so mine's in grey. So number one, which means it's important, but it's not a big important. I want to speak to people this morning. Number one, who are going to be revisited by old enemies. Who are going to be revisited by old enemies. You know, this is a really heavy message for me to carry this morning. I've been carrying this message all week. And the longer the week has gone, the nearer it's got to Sunday, the heavier the message has become for me to carry. So I really want to offload this morning to somebody. It's kind of one of these mornings that I would really love to have the worship team around me playing keyboards and guitars and the kind of stuff they do to kind of lift me a little bit, because this is really heavy. So please bear with me this morning. But this is how important it is. There are people who are going to be revisited by old enemies. They may come dressed as friends, and they may come dressed as help, and they may come dressed as people who come into your life and say, listen, I know what happened, but I've changed. And they might come dressed not like an old enemy. But I've got to, and I don't think this is a warning, I think it's preparation for somebody. I'd rather say preparation than warning. You're going to be revisited by old enemies. So don't be taken by surprise. And don't be taken back when these people come into our lives again, because they are simply old enemies. Number two, I want to talk to people. This message is directed at people this morning. Someone being harassed. I wonder who's out there this morning. And you're being harassed. Harassed means you're being stalked, or you're being followed by someone or something unwanted. You know, 15 years is a long time. 15 years is a long time to be stalked. 15 years is a long time to be harassed by guilt. 15 years is a long time to be harassed by shame and by regret. And 15 years is a long time to be harassed by bad memories and by fear. You know, David in Psalm 23 said, surely goodness and mercy will follow me, will harass me, will stalk me all of my days. And that's brilliant. I believe that this morning. But when someone is being followed by guilt for 15 years, and when someone is being followed by shame for 15 years, and when somebody is being followed by bad memories for 15 years, or by regret for 15 years, or by fear for 15 years. It's no fun and it's no life. And it can feel like you're being harassed. And I believe this morning there are people who for 5, 10, 15 years maybe have been harassed and stalked and followed by shame and by guilt and by fear and by bad memories. And this message is for you this morning. Number 3, this message is this morning for someone who's resolved. The Bible uses the word resolve. Resolve means determination. It means strength. And I want to speak to somebody this morning. This message is for somebody this morning whose determination, whose strength, whose resolve is being sapped. In other words, your determination and your strength has been drained. Your energy has been drained by old enemies. And I would love to know who I'm talking to this morning. I think some of this applies to a lot of people, but most of this morning is directed at someone in particular who can identify with all of those 3 things that I've just said. These are old enemies. Somebody said this morning, old enemies. These are old battles, right? You with me? These are old struggles. These are old fights. These are, if I can put it this way, historical enemies. Not new. You know, the pandemic thing that we're going through right now is a new enemy, right? And I'm not talking about that kind of enemy. But I will say this, sometimes old enemies can come riding on the back of things like a pandemic. They can come riding on the back of lockdown. They can come riding on the back of something. And number 1 this morning, big point number 1, and this is the big point. And this is kind of where I got the ideas from for this message this morning. Number 1 this morning is this. So I've got this in black, okay? This is important. Number 1, there's something familiar about old enemies. Are you with me? There's something familiar about old enemies. I've called this message this morning strangely familiar, because there's something strangely familiar about old enemies. And there's also something dangerous about old enemies. Especially when they tell you that they've changed. Especially when they tell you, I'm different, I've changed. There's something that you recognize about them. There's something, even when they're disguised, there's something you recognize about them. No matter how much they pretend to have changed, or pretend that they're different, or pretend they've come to help you, or pretend I'm here to build with you, I'm on your side, I'm applauding for you, I'm clapping for you. There's just something that you recognize about them even when they are disguised. There's something you are acquainted with. That's what recognize means. It means you are acquainted with them. Because they've been close to you before. Because you let them in before. There's something that's known to you. And like the title of the message says this morning, there is something familiar. And I really want you to grab hold this morning of those 2 words that I began that reading in Ezra 4 with, old enemies. To prepare you this week, to prepare you in the next couple of weeks maybe for something or someone to come back in your life that you haven't seen for a while, that you haven't been with for a while, that they haven't affected you for a while. And just when you thought you were having some kind of breakthrough, some kind of freedom, old enemies come in. It's kind of like, and this is where this message came from a few months ago. It's kind of like meeting someone that you haven't seen for a while. And I think that's happening a lot nowadays. We saw a couple yesterday as we're in Marks and Spencer. I haven't seen them for a couple of years now. They've been through all kinds of stuff. And just to suddenly come upon them, in M&S at the end of an aisle, it's wow. I haven't seen you for a while, and that's happening a lot these days. And I've got to tell you something. I am the worst at this. That I can meet somebody that I might have been really close to them a few years ago, really, really good friends, and I can meet them now, and I don't recognize them. I'm useless at this. If you haven't seen, if you meet them out in a different environment, for instance, and you've known them and you know them, but then when in a strange environment, or when they suddenly appear in front of you, and it takes me ages sometimes to kind of figure out who is this person, especially when we're all wearing masks nowadays. And I don't recognize people that I've known for years, perhaps. Has anybody else got that problem that it takes you a while before you recognize who you're talking to? I met a guy, and this is where this message came from. I met a guy a few months ago now. And it was when the shops were open in the Metro Centre. I was walking through Next, and it was kind of 9 o'clock in the morning. It was first thing. I'm heading towards Starbucks and the first coffee of the day. And just suddenly, at the end, out of the corner of an aisle, this guy comes up to me and says, "Dave Matthews." I says, "Yeah, wearing masks and everything. How do you recognize me?" I didn't wear it. And he begins to talk, and it's quite obvious that he knows everything about me. And it's quite obvious he knows our family. It's quite obvious he's asking about church, and he's asking how we're all doing. He's asking how the building's going. And it's quite obvious he's known us for quite a few years, and he follows us on Instagram and Twitter, all that kind of stuff, and Facebook. And he's talking away, right? And I do not have a clue who this guy is. Seriously. I mean, he's talking for a good 10 minutes, which is a long time for me to talk to somebody in a shop. I'm only in and out and hi, goodbye. But he's talking for like 10 minutes, and he's asking all questions, and he's telling me about how they're doing, and yeah, that's great, mate. You can't think of somebody's name, you just call them mate. Right? Oh, that's great, mate. That's fantastic, mate. Yeah, I'm racking my brains. I'm calling on God to give me revelation. And God, if you're really there, give me some revelation. This guy is. This is going to be really embarrassing because I don't know who he is. And I kind of do that thing, right? Where you do that thing where you kind of say, "Who are you? Who's that behind the mask?" Right? You get it? Yeah. If you don't watch The Masked Singer, you haven't a clue what I'm talking about. So just kind of, you can take it off now. Who's that behind? I'm thinking, God, who's this? And then we say, "Hey, finish. I've got to go," and all that kind of. "See you, mate." Still don't know what his name is. I haven't a clue. And he said, "See you, Dave. Have a great time. We're praying for you, Dave." Like, "Hey, that's great, thanks. Yeah, great." Thanks. And I have a clue who he is. I don't know who he is, so I kind of forget about it. A couple of days later, I see him. I see his photograph on Instagram with some people that we know, and suddenly it clicks, and his name comes back to me, and how we know him comes back to me, and I suddenly get this, and I felt an idiot because we've known them for years, right? Or going way back, we've known them for quite a few years now. They're all a friend of ours, and I hadn't a clue, and then I realised I never liked him. Right? It's okay. I mean, it's all right. You're supposed to love people, but it doesn't mean you got to like them. I never liked him. So I just realised I spent 10 minutes of my morning talking to somebody who I didn't really like. And although he wasn't an old enemy, right, he wasn't somebody that I would gladly kind of sit down and share a coffee with. But are you with me this morning? You ever done that? Ever met somebody who's come upon you by surprise? And at first, they looked a bit like a stranger. They're a bit older. They're a bit bigger. They're a bit thinner. The hair's different. They're wearing the mask. Who's that behind? They look like a stranger, right? But there's something familiar. You can't quite put your finger on who they are, but there's something familiar. Then after some awkward moments, my wife's very good at this very quickly, right? I'm very bad at this very slowly. So she'll sometimes say to me as we're walking away, do you know who that was? I said, I have no idea who that was. And she'll tell me who it was. And they go, oh yeah, I used to know them. They're not a stranger. You do know them, but they look different, right? They dress different. They appear different, but they are familiar. And then you recognize them. At the end of the conversation, you recognize them and you say, I know who this is. Wow, it's been like 5 years, you haven't changed a bit. How can you make up this false conversation? You're lying through your teeth, you don't know who they were, and forget to begin with. Do you get what I mean this morning? Strangely familiar. Number 2 this morning, I'm going to finish on this number 2 this morning. Sometimes, right? Sometimes old enemies will revisit your life all the time. Are you with me? Sometimes old enemies will revisit your life all the time. Zerubbabel's old enemies will have changed appearance after 15 years, right? After 15 years, everybody changes appearance. Doesn't matter how much work you get done to yourself, how much makeup you put on, how much you try and, cover up stuff and things. After 15 years, everybody changes. We've got some old photographs that we've been looking through just recently, and my goodness, how we as a family have changed over 15 years. Some of us for the better. I'll say all of us for the better, right? Most of us have lost weight and we've looked after ourselves and we've tried to do our best. But it doesn't matter how much we try, we all change over 15 years, right? Zerubbabel's old enemies would have changed appearance over 15 years, but there would have been something strangely familiar about them. Are you with me? There would have been something strangely familiar. They weren't strangers. They were strangely familiar. Old enemies. Old enemies can be, right, I've got a list of things here. Old enemies, obviously, the most obvious can be people. People who hurt you, people who wronged you, people who dissed you, maybe 15 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, maybe a year ago. But old enemies can be people. And I'm sure that when you get to 64 years and 9 months, right, you have some old enemies, right? You don't get to 64 years and 9 months like I have without having some old enemies, without having being hurt by some people, being let down by some people, by being abused verbally by some people. You don't get that. But I'm guessing this morning that most people out there this morning have old enemies. People who you fell out with, people who wronged you, people who accused you, people who desperately, deeply hurt you. We've all got them. So old enemies can be people. But old enemies can also be feelings. Old enemies can also be feelings that we had. Old enemies can also be problems. Old enemies can be things, things like addiction, things like eating disorders, things like self-harming, like depression can be an old enemy, like panic attacks, right? Are you with me this morning? Like crippling anxiety can be an old enemy. Old enemies like overwhelming fear. Has anybody this morning got some old enemies that you can name this morning? Things that you struggled with and battled with maybe 5, 10, 15 years, like Zerubbabel did with these people. For 15 years, he battled old enemies. Is anybody this morning facing something again that you faced then? Going through something again that you faced then? and you're struggling this morning, and it's sapping your energy, it's sapping your strength. Have you ever had an old enemy revisit you after 5, 10, 15 years, and you thought they had left your life for good? You thought you had moved on. You thought you had got bigger than that depression, or bigger than that panic attack, or bigger than that anxiety. And yet this morning you're finding out that old enemies can revisit you. Who am I talking to this morning? Who's being revisited by an old enemy? You thought you were free of them. And then out of nowhere, like people sometimes catch you by surprise, out of nowhere, and you get this feeling, I've felt like this before. You see, this pandemic, this lockdown thing, this whole restriction thing, old enemies can really ride on the back of this. Can really ride on the back. You know, you've heard the old story about Troy, haven't you? The city of Troy. It wasn't the enemies that brought Troy down. It was the Trojan horse. It was the Trojan horse within the city. It was something inside the city that brought the city down. It wasn't the enemy outside. It was the enemy inside. And sometimes, you know, we are like that. The pandemic isn't a new enemy, but old enemies can come riding in within this Trojan horse called lockdown and pandemic and fear. You know, the old fear can come in. The old anxiety can come in. The old depression can come in. The old scare tactics and the old panic attacks can come in on the back of something else. And you've felt like this before. You've had these feelings before. The thing approaching you is not a stranger. You've seen them before. They are old enemies. And I am praying this morning for people. And we're going to continue. Like I said, this is a huge message. And I'm going to continue next week with this. But we are praying this morning for people. I'm praying for people this morning who are being revisited by old enemies. That you're being pre-warned right now. That you're being prepared right now. That they won't catch you by surprise. And they won't bring you down. For people this morning who are being harassed, we are praying this morning, and I'm praying this morning that you will be set free from that once and for all. And next week we're going to talk about that so much more. Is anybody this morning being revisited by old enemies? People, feelings, emotions, things that you never thought you'd see again, but this morning I want to tell you something. The first thing we're doing is praying. The second thing we're doing is declaring freedom over your life. And the third thing we're doing is praying protection over your life this morning. That those old enemies won't bring you down like the Trojan horse brought the city of Troy down. That's what we are praying this morning. And we're believing that you will have the strength, that you will have the energy, that you will have the determination to see off these old enemies. That you won't let them in. Even though they say they've changed, even though they say they're different, even though they say they're on your side, even though they say we're serving the same God, aren't we? That you will have the strength and determination to keep them at arm's length. And that you will be free once and for all of these things that have attacked you in the past and these things that could have brought you down. Listen, I'm telling you this morning, I'm declaring this over your life this morning. I'm speaking this over someone's life this morning. These old enemies will not bring you down. Can somebody believe that for your life this morning? Whatever the old enemy is, if the old enemy is a person, if the old enemy is a feeling, if the old enemy is a thing, we are declaring over your life, we are speaking over your life, we are praying over your life this morning, that old enemy will not bring you down this morning, but you will bring it down this morning. You will destroy it. You will put your feet on its head and you will destroy it this morning. Once and for all, in Jesus' name, you will be free. And that old enemy will not revisit you again. But right now, you've got to fight. And right now, you've got to stand. And right now, you've got to declare truth over that, declare victory over that, and declare freedom over that. In Jesus' name, can somebody receive this message this morning, wherever you are, whoever you are, whatever your old enemy is this morning? Can somebody, I wish we were in church this morning, and you could praise, and you could clap, and you could lift your hands, and you could say, that's me talking to you this morning, Dave. I wish we were there, but we're not. We soon will be, but not yet. In the meantime, stand strong, stand determined. And if you've got to, stand stubborn. Okay? In Jesus' name. Don't forget, next week is part 2 of this. And you know what? I'm going to carry this for another week until I get it all out, because this is a really heavy message to carry. But I know this morning is going to set somebody free and going to help somebody. I hope it's you. If this message is not for you, maybe there's somebody in your life who needs to hear this. In Jesus' name. Hey, have a good week. We're praying for you. We're missing you. Can't wait to get together in the room where it happens. Amen. Have a great week. God bless you. Bye.